You're in the living room and remember something you need from the kitchen. You stand up and walk through the doorway, but it's gone, as if it was never there. Then, when you return to the living room, it floods back to you the moment you cross that threshold again. This isn't just a sign of getting older or not paying attention. It's a specific effect caused by the doorway itself. In 2011, psychologist Gabriel Radvansky at the University of Notre Dame aimed to test a concept that seems too straightforward for real science. Does walking through a doorway cause forgetting, independent of distance or time? His team placed individuals in a virtual environment, had them pick up an object from a table, and carry it either across a large room or through a doorway into a new one, covering the same distance. They then tested memory for the object. Those who had walked through a doorway remembered worse than those who had walked the same distance without crossing one. The team replicated this in a real lab, with participants carrying actual objects hidden in showboxes to prevent them from glancing at what they held. The results remained the same. The doorway itself, neither the distance nor the time, was responsible for the forgetting. Here's the reasoning behind this. Radvansky explains that a doorway acts as what cognitive psychologists call an event boundary, a marker your brain uses to categorize experiences. That was one experience, and now a new one is starting. Event segmentation theory, developed by Jeffrey Sachs and Keena Swallow, suggests that your brain does not see life as one continuous flow. Instead, it divides it into distinct chunks, known as event models: making coffee, walking to the car, the conversation in the kitchen. It relies on environmental cues, especially changes in location, to signal when to wrap up one chunk and start another. Crossing a doorway causes your brain to treat the room you just left as a completed file. It gets stored away, and anything that was actively in your mind, like why you entered the kitchen, gets pushed out to accommodate the new event model in the new room. This switching process happens due to a limitation many don't consider. Working memory, which holds whatever you are actively using, can only manage a few items at a time, typically around 4 meaningful bits of information for an adult. This space is limited and continually reorganized. An event boundary effectively signals the workspace to clear out and prepare for new information, assuming that what mattered in the last room probably won't be relevant in the new one. Most of the time, this is a reasonable assumption. But sometimes, like when you need the item you just forgot, it doesn't hold up. This isn't just a vague concept. There's a specific neural signature for it. Researchers analyzing brains while people watched movies found that the hippocampus, the area most linked to forming new long-term memories, shows a distinct spike in activity at moments when viewers sense that one scene has ended and another has begun. Neuroscientists Ariel Benyokov and Yardin Dudai identified this pattern in 2011. A landmark study in 2017 by Christopher Baldacino and colleagues mapped when different brain regions shift from one stable activity pattern to another during continuous experiences, confirming that these boundary moments are real, identifiable events in the brain, not merely a way of discussing behavior later. Follow-up studies showed this same hippocampal response even in areas beyond the hippocampus in a layered hierarchy: fast sensory regions marking minor boundaries and slower, higher-order regions marking significant ones, similar to leaving the kitchen versus leaving for the day. Importantly, the size of the hippocampal spike predicts how well the previous event will be remembered later. Bigger spike equals better memory for what happened before the boundary. Your brain isn't randomly losing information. It's actively closing a folder, and that closing process impacts what was contained. What makes this so interesting is that it doesn't just happen at physical doorways. Radvansky's later work showed the same effect occurs with virtual boundaries, switching from one computer window to another, moving between different desktops, or navigating different websites. It's not the physical doorway that matters. It's the cognitive cue that indicates a shift in context. That means the reason you forget why you opened a new tab is essentially the same as why you forget why you walked into the kitchen. A follow-up study in 2016 by Kyle Pettijohn and Radvansky explored whether the effect was related to the event boundary itself or just the additional time and steps a doorway adds to a journey. They controlled for retention interval and mental load directly, and the location updating effect persisted. It wasn't simply that doorways took longer to cross. The boundary itself was genuinely affecting memory, separate from the walk. Notably, This effect tends to be most pronounced when you are already managing multiple tasks, since a working memory system near capacity has less flexibility to retain an item through a necessary context switch. There's another side that's useful to know because it turns a frustrating quirk into something you can use. Memory researchers already understand that recall is context-dependent. A classic study from 1975 by Godden and Baddeley had divers memorize word lists either underwater or on land, then tested recall in either the same environment or a different one. They found that people remembered significantly better when the recall environment matched the one where they learned the material. This is exactly why returning to the living room helps you remember. You haven't lost the memory, just the cue tied to that specific experience. Stepping back into the same room gives you that cue again. Combining these ideas reveals a practical solution that actually works. If you feel your thoughts slipping as you approach a doorway, say it out loud or visualize the object you intend to get before crossing. You're giving your brain something to carry into the new context instead of leaving it stored in the one you're closing. It's a small trick, but it targets the actual mechanism, not just a superstition. A quick note on the evidence. The doorway effect has been replicated in several independent experiments, both in virtual and physical settings, by Radvansky's team and others. It's as reliable as effects in cognitive psychology can be. Event segmentation theory is a well-established framework that continues to be refined. The hippocampal boundary signal is exciting neuroscience, but it comes from studies observing movie watching. Walking through a real doorway hasn't been directly measured in the same way, so we infer the neural picture for that specific everyday scenario from a similar paradigm, rather than measuring it directly. Additionally, be cautious with claims about exaggerated disorientation at doorways. That can occur in certain cognitive conditions, but that's a different, more serious issue than everyday forgetting, and nothing here should be seen as diagnostic. So, the next time this happens, and it will probably occur again today before you finish watching this video, you'll know what's really going on. Your brain didn't malfunction. It did exactly what it's meant to do. Closed one folder to make room for the next, and the thing you wanted stayed behind in the room you just exited. Return and stand in the doorway again. It's likely still there.